Hey guys, welcome back to Farm Wife Life. Today I'm going to be processing my lard that I got from our pig that we got butchered this winter. So I thought I'd show you what the #1 tip is if you want to render lard, and I'll show you how I do it. I do mine in the crock pot. I know you can do it on the stovetop, but I'm working during the day, so I'm a little busy. I like doing it in the crock pot, and I'll show you how I do it throughout the day. That way on the stovetop you're going to have to stand there and watch it a little bit closer than you would have to in the crock pot. So I'll show you the bag we got. So this is what we got. I'll weigh it here so we have an idea of how much fat we got versus how much lard I got out of it, and I'll show you my #1 tip here in just a minute. So let's weigh it. I'm gonna cut it up. It is in a little bit bigger pieces, so I like to chop it down just a little bit. I think it processes a little bit faster when it's smaller pieces. So I'll show you how much we have in fat, the weight of it, and then I'll show you how I do it. So come along. Okay, as you can see, these are definitely big pieces that came in here. So like I said, I'm just gonna chop these up a little bit and throw them in the crock pot. Okay, so let's talk about meat that is going to come on the fat. So you definitely want to cut as much of that off as possible. You're not going to want to render that down. Now with that being said, if you have some meat on your fat that you're rendering, that's okay. It's not great. It's not going to help your lard be as shelf stable as possible. But when I say that, there's different reviews. People say if you have the crystal white clear lard, then it can be shelf stable. I always put a jar in the fridge, and that has always lasted me months. The remainder jars I actually keep in the freezer until I'm ready to use it. Okay, so what happens if you have some meat on your fat when you're rendering it down? Like I said, it's okay. So as you're starting to render this down, you're gonna start pulling the lard out of the crock pot as it cooks down. That's gonna be the fat that comes off first. So as the hours go on and it's cooking down in the crock pot, that meat that is left on the fat is actually gonna start cooking. And that is why your lard is going to start changing to a little bit more of a yellow color than that crystal white lard. And this little bit of a more yellow lard, that's perfectly fine, because that is the lard that you're going to want to save to use when you're cooking or frying anything up, because like I said, it's going to have a little bit of that pork flavor on it. And here you can see what we have left over from the bag in the crock pot. I am going to set this on high just to get it going, and I'll turn it down later once it starts boiling more. So that was easy enough, right? Chop it up a little smaller, throw it in the crock pot. Are you ready for your #1 tip when you are rendering lard? Now clearly this is gonna be kind of silly, but go with me. Open up that patio door. If you guys have never rendered lard before, it stinks. It stinks real bad. My husband freaks out every time I render lard, but trust me, it is so worth it. And why I say this is the #1 tip when you're rendering lard is, I've said it a million times in these videos. I live in North Dakota. We got this pig processed in winter. I can't have my windows and doors open in the winter. So I had to save this lard in my freezer until it finally warmed up enough that I could open up the doors. Because trust me, your house is gonna stink. So follow my tip. If this is your first time ever rendering lard, make sure you wait until a certain time of year for your area wherever you live that you can have your windows and doors open, because trust me, you're gonna thank me. So I'm gonna let this cook down. I'll show you as the process goes what you need to do as your lard renders down. So up next. Okay, so this is 1 hour in. Just gonna stir it up a little bit here. You can definitely see it's starting to cook down a bit. I don't know if you can see. Not a lot of grease in the bottom yet. Okay, so we are about 3 hours in. I just showed you what it looks like. You can see as they're starting to have liquid form, I'm gonna start to pull that out. So I think what I wanna do when you render down your lard, the very first stuff you're gonna start taking out of there, that's gonna be the kind of like the cleanest lard. It's gonna be the most white. That's the stuff you're gonna wanna save for when you're making your pies or biscuits or whatever you wanna do with baking, because that's gonna have less of the pork flavor to it. The longer it cooks down, the more flavor is actually gonna be in that lard. So that I save for frying food or just, you know, making your suppers type of things when you're cooking with your meats. So I think what I like to do is get a pint the first go around. So I don't know if I have a pint yet. It's kind of hard to tell when you're looking around the chunks of fat in there still. So I think I'm gonna let it go just a little bit longer, and then I'll show you what I do to scoop that out and get it into the jars. So we'll wait a little bit longer and then I'll show you what we're gonna do. Okay, so I just start with a strainer over top of the jar. I use a paper towel. You can definitely use cheesecloth, and I did when I first started doing this, but I just realized that I just don't use cheesecloth enough to really make it worth me trying to remember to buy it on occasion. So I use a paper towel, and I've never had an issue using that. So the rest is pretty straightforward. Just keep ladling this in until you fill your jar up. Okay, and you can see why we use a paper towel, because there are little chunks in there that we definitely want to catch so it doesn't get in the jar. Okay, you know what, I just had a thought. Does anyone else notice how dang expensive butter and oil is these days? So I like to use lard, and I've kind of been using lard for a couple years now, even before prices started getting crazy. So I'm gonna try start incorporating it more often to get away from the butter and the oil till I can convince my husband to get a milk cow or dairy goats. That'll be a whole nother story if that happens. So my parents have a camper that we use. I think I might do a jelly jar size of the lard to put that in our camper, because I don't want to put a whole pint in there because our summers are very short. I'm not gonna get time to use it, but I like that idea. Mom, if you're watching, I'm putting some lard in the camper. Hope you don't mind. Okay, so this is what you end up with in the bottom of your crock pot. These are actually called cracklings, and you can actually fry these up even further with some salt, and I know people eat them. I don't, however. And this is what we got out of the whole crock pot. So here we are. We can see the first few jars that I pulled out, how they're already turning white. And after a few hours with them all sitting and hardening, you can start to see how the first few jars are definitely a lot more white than the last 2 jars. And again, I am going to save those last 2 jars, and I'm actually just going to put them in the freezer for now for later use. And I'm going to use those when I'm doing my cooking with my meats. And I just want to give you one last little comparison of my first jar versus the last jar that I pulled out of the crock pot. I hope this all helps, guys. Thanks for watching. Hit the like button and subscribe down below. I'd really appreciate it.